as a novelist and an editor, I take the written word very seriously, and I have a hard time with someone like Chad Daybell pretending to be a writer. In court, during his trial, John Pryor tried to make it sound like Chad was just writing a new book. He was branching into romance. This little thing that he wrote to Lori, that wasn't actually autobiographical. It was just a new book he was working on. And here's the problem with a couple of problems with that. Number one, texting is a very laborious way to draft something. It can happen, but you don't send it via text to somebody. You're stuck in bed and sick or something. And I've known some people who've done that. You would put it into, say, a Google Doc or in a note, and then you download it later to your own device. You're not texting it to someone. But more importantly, Chad's audience is a very, very conservative element of Latter-day Saints who are already generally pretty conservative. Now, I published in the Latter-day Saint fiction market for a good 10 years. There's a moment where there's a character who she loves reading and loves books. And she says that she really loves the epic Christian poem called Paradise Lost by John Milton. Very, very Christian. About as Christian as you can get. The storyline, if you're unfamiliar with Paradise Lost, it's about Adam and Eve in the garden and the fall. Basically, it's a Christian story, or biblical. If you go through any kind of writing situation, it's not much of a fun story if there's no conflict for the characters to overcome, right? You've got to have some sort of problems. And so people often say that despite Milton's best efforts to make the Garden of Eden sections interesting, they're just not, because there's no conflict. The sections that take place in hell are far more interesting because there's conflict and interesting things happening. So I have my character basically say something along those lines that, my parents might be, horrified if they knew that I actually find the sections that take place in hell more interesting than the ones that take place in the garden. Now, my publisher flagged that. You can't say hell. Readers will be mad. We can't do that. I said, no one's cussing. No one's using it as a swear word. And they said, doesn't matter. And I said, but it's a literary reference from a very Christian text. Doesn't matter. I said, it's even a geographical reference. It's not a swear. It's a geographical literary reference. They said, no. My editor said, I agree with you, but the committee still says no. It wasn't until I found another one of their novels published a few years before that had a reference to Dante's Inferno and the Circles of Hell. I said, look, on this book, on this page, you have a literary geographical reference that says hell. I have a literary geographical reference to hell? And they finally said, okay. That's the level of conservative we're talking about. I had another friend who published it with the same publisher. He was quoting a scripture about how liars will be cast down to hell. They wouldn't let him quote the entire scripture. It was liars will be cast down to ... A sweet love story like a rom-com or something, you will never get more than a kiss. And if it's too heated of a kiss, even that's going to be like, oh, tone it down. Nothing beyond that. So if Chad is trying to write romance, it's not going to be skeevy romance. It's not going to be spicy. It's not going to be hot unless he's completely changing his entire audience, which he's not going to do. It's Chad. Okay. That said, let's read Chad's smut. Now, this love story, romance, whatever, there's 2 chapters. It was sent to Lori on July 14th of 2019. It's basically a recounting of their little love story. Keeping in mind, both of their spouses are alive, and both spouses think they're in committed relationships at this point, beginning on October 26th when they first met of 2018. So it says October 26th. This is referring to the past, like 8 or 9 months previous, when they first met, but the texts are coming out on July 14th, 3 days after Charles was killed. No grief, no sadness, no taste, no class, nothing. Gross. This is Chad's attempt at a romance. Can I do this? Okay, I need distasteful. Flat Mountain Dew, but also the fact that I have to read Chad Daybell's gross words with my commentary and reaction. Okay, here we go. Friday morning, October 26th, driving south on the freeway, a voice said, ... You will meet an extraordinary woman today who will change your life forever. This was shocking, since such a thing seemed very unlikely at this conference. It is actually a very detailed story that began long ago. on another world. And I will cover that part as I go along and the characters figure things out. Part of the concept of show not tell, this is the most telly, obnoxious little narrative dump in there. So poorly done. But on the morning of October 26th, James arrived in St. George, still a bit baffled by the message he had received. Now, St. George is like one of the southernmost areas of Utah. It's like right on the border with Arizona. He unloaded his books and set up his table, then joined the organizers for dinner in the main room. He saw his friend, M.G., who we now know as Melanie Gibb, who had been so helpful to him when he spoke in Mesa that July. M.G. introduced James to her friend Elena. And we know, of course, that James and Elena are names for themselves. Chad and Lori. They have other names as well that they use, but that's two of them from their past lives. So M.G. introduced James to her friend Elena. When their hands touched, he felt a shock pass through him, and his heart started beating fast. Now, I'll say that isn't terrible for a romance, but $10 says he stole that from someone else. Elena was gorgeous. And this is where I want to go. Show not tell, dude. Like, gorgeous to one person is not gorgeous to another. So, like, tell us, like, what do you even know her hair color at this point? Like, give us some visuals. But he's not a good writer. So, no. So, Elena was gorgeous and vivacious. And James was a little intimidated, yet honored that she would talk to him. He was happily surprised when she mentioned a key part of his novel, The Renewed Earth. No one had ever recognized the significance of that scene before. So basically, like, she's pumping his ego throughout this whole thing. And it was read in court for Chad's trial, and I had a video, I'll link to it, that he absolutely 100% plagiarized from a Latter-day Saint musical from the 70s. For Gen X, you know, Saturday's Warrior. This is almost verbatim. He had heard that voice before and seen that smile before. He felt that they had even talked like this before, but who could be certain when?
I've seen that smile somewhere before.
I've heard your voice before.
It seems we've talked like this before. Sometime, who can be certain when?
But if I knew you then, it's strange I can't remember.
It was strange, but he could remember. The feelings were very strong, as if they had known each other, oh, so long. They didn't get many chances to talk after that because he had to help voice a women's blue pup Muppet. I have questions. Why did he include that detail? I don't know. That's so weird. But he watched her every chance he could. And to me, I'm like, stalk her much? That's creepy. He had to stay at a relative's house that night, but he hardly slept. He kept envisioning himself with Elena in very wonderful situations that indicated they had been more than just friends. And those two words are capitalized. Again, he's still supposedly happily married to Tammy, and she's married to Charles. Nothing creepy's happened as far as Charles and Tammy are aware of yet. But in a year, they would both be gone. James was the first speaker on Saturday morning and knew exactly where Elena was sitting. Hidden True Crime actually has a recording from that exact day in his speech, and it's not good. He's not a good speaker. He made sure to mention the scene from his book that they had discussed the previous evening. He was completely smitten by her and was even nervous of what she would think of his talk as he spoke. But when he would glance at her, she was always attentive and watching him, unlike the rest of the crowd. After his talk, he went to his book table. His talk had gone well. But you just said that the audience wasn't paying attention. Okay. There was a good group gathered around to buy his books. His heart nearly leaped out of his chest when Elena joined him and helped sell the books. She was so beautiful that he could hardly concentrate on the customers. Really, Chad? She straightened the books and gave the books great reviews, although she made him laugh a lot when she kept pushing the youth and fifth volumes of his first series. The fifth volume was of his first series, but the youth volume? Like, what the heck is even that? If you know, let me know. I haven't delved into Chad's actual books. I haven't had the stomach yet. I'm reading Visions of Glory. Again, thank you to the viewer who sent that to me. And I can only read a few pages a day, to be honest. It's making me ill because so many people have taken that book and run with it into crazy things. And I have so many thoughts on that. And almost every page has notes that I'm jotting in there. Stay tuned on that. He could only giggle when people asked if she was his wife, because yes, in fact, she was. She just didn't know it yet. Oh, gross. I think he could only giggle. Ladies, you can chime in here, but if you read that a man is giggling, that doesn't feel particularly masculine. That's what like children do. James was definitely having amorous feelings toward Elena as they sold books together. He had not felt this happy in his entire life. Not even when his children were born or the day he married his wife. Okay. He was quite sure this was the woman the voice had told him about. James was ecstatic. So every time it says James was, that is weak. You can use was. I've written entire articles about when you can use was and when you don't. But if you have character's name was and then a describing word like happy, or like in this case, he was quite sure, he was definitely having, that's weak. There are far stronger ways to phrase something. So no. James was ecstatic because he had already fallen deeply in love with her. I think the word you're looking for is lust. You don't know her. You can't possibly love her. Or better said, he remembered how much he already loved her. Because, of course, past lives. Her eyes had mesmerized him from the moment they met. But once the book sales slowed down, she stood near him, behind the table. They looked deeply into each other's eyes for the first time, and he knew he was in the presence of a goddess. He resisted an impulse to kiss her, but his entire body was on fire. He instinctively knew she was everything he had ever dreamed of. Forget the fact that you've got a wife and 5 kids. I must clarify. So I want to go, who's this I, by the way? Like the narrative I is something that like worked in the Victorian era, but it doesn't work today. Like that's not good writing. I must clarify that James is a very difficult person to get information from. He has been blessed with great knowledge. But 99% of the people he knows do not realize that. Arrogant, ego much, and also narcissist. Oh gosh, I have been blessed with knowledge, but nobody recognizes my brilliance. He is very guarded, and it is a great task to gain his trust. But as Elena leaned forward, there's a word missing, toward him, and asked a couple of very insightful questions, his heart burst with joy. He knew she was the one, one of the very few people, very few people on earth he could trust. Translation, one of the few people who recognizes his inherent genius as he views it. Gag. James's spirit was so excited at this revelation that he shattered a thick veil that had been placed between these two souls during their mortal lives. The thick veil had been placed because of the unique, unparalleled love James and Elena had shared in previous lifetimes. That veil had prevented them from finding each other until this appointed day that would be remembered throughout the heavens as the true beginning of a spectacular mission that would save millions of souls and defeat the forces of darkness. Sounds like a Lord of the Rings really bad parody. But also, like, why was the veil put there if it's so important they find each other? Why was the veil there? He was so excited that his excitement shattered this veil that like God had put in place. Okay. James's physical attraction to Elena was almost overwhelming, but he was equally drawn to the spiritual energy that was radiating from her. As they talked, it was confirmed to him that they had indeed been married before and were eternal companions. Now, we know that from the trials, and we know that that belief is what justified their affair. That if we believe in eternal marriage, then if we were married before, then we're still married. That is not how any of this works, you schmuck. He had glimpses of them walking dusty paths together. Oh, this is the recognizing where we're going from the trial. Okay. And he realized that they had been married during the life of Jesus Christ. So we're just throwing full-on blasphemy in here. Okay. And they had been very close to him, to Jesus. Oh my goodness. At this time, their spirits could not be restrained any longer, and a long-awaited makeout session took place in that lobby. This was manifest. Okay, this is the part. Okay, we're going to have to bring in the Keith Morrison bit here.
And a long-awaited makeout session took place in that lobby. This was manifest in the mortal world to James and Elena through the scientific phenomenon known as loin fire.
As they talked, James had a burning desire to make love to her, but he wasn't sure she felt the same way. But they could not stay away from each other. One time she was sitting in a couch near the table, and he took a seat on a chair about 5 feet from her. So weirdly, he's getting specific now. when he was so general before. She began to squirm and covered her body with her hands. She asked him, "What are you doing?" He wasn't aware of what she meant. All he knew was that if Bruce Porter hadn't been giving them the evil eye, a child would have been conceived on that couch. I don't know who Bruce Porter is, but thank you, sir. Thank you for being present and giving them the evil eye. The idea of the two of them, there are certain things that are like are sensual and like a turn on, and the idea of Chad and Lori is just one of them. The erotic tension continued through the afternoon. I would venture to say that physical attraction is something that Chad and Lori mistook for godly spiritual feelings. James could only think of her. His desire for her was indescribable, so he doesn't even try. Thankfully, she had worn 16 layers of clothing to survive the 80-degree weather. 16 layers of clothing. And then to survive the 80-degree weather is like, that's supposed to be cold for her since she's from Arizona. So he was not fully aware that she truly had the body of a goddess. Her dimensions were exactly what he had always fantasized about, but that revelation would have to wait a month. Oh, that's such crappy writing. Like, you don't jump around in time like, oh my gosh, dude, you suck. As the night concluded, James needed to take his empty boxes to his car. With Elena's help, he had sold more books at a show than he ever had before. She helped him carry the boxes to the car, and then he could not resist the desire to hug her. He made an awkward attempt that was way too brief, because their friends were bringing more boxes. And that short embrace, though, he knew he had found the woman he had searched for his entire life. It was made crystal clear to him that they had been married before and would be again. So crystal clear, cliche much, but also if this is supposedly a good and righteous thing, then why are they hiding it from their friends? Because they know it's not. He once again had to fight off a powerful urge to kiss her and somehow disguise the massive erection he was experiencing. Massive. He did call it the storm later. They returned to the building and he helped carry tables to the second floor while she sat on the couch. They couldn't take their eyes off each other. He was already madly in love. In case we didn't catch it, that other 10 times he said so. Her group of friends finally had to leave. He was devastated, unused. Wait, it says unused, but I'm thinking he meant unsure how he would ever contact her again. Then her spirit took over and asked him, "Can I get your cell number in case I have some questions?" They exchanged numbers and then they gave each other a hug goodbye. Okay, if he's friends with Melanie Gibb at this point, she could have gotten the number from him. He could have gotten the number. It was the most wonderful, electric, delicious hug he had ever felt. Strings of adjectives, not generally a good writing. Most wonderful, electric, delicious. That's bad writing. Then he watched her walk away knowing she was truly going to change his life forever. End of chapter 1. That's an all cap. Now I will say, they changed each other's lives. They did. And they did get married, but that's about it. Chapter 2. James sadly walked to his car after watching Elena disappear down the hallway, but he couldn't deny their connection and his absolute attraction to her. She still seemed out of his league, but he nervously sent her a text before driving to his hotel. A minute passed, then 2, without a response. He kicked himself for thinking he ever had a chance with her. Okay, but what about like this revelation that they'd been married before and would be again, and the whole shattering of that thick veil did none of that actually happen? Why am I questioning his statements? Then his phone buzzed. Elena had texted back. His heart soared, like cliche, and over the next few hours they texted back and forth dozens of times. Hopefully not in the car, dude. He knew she was staying at home in Tokerville, and he desperately wanted to drive there and whisk her back to the hotel for a night of reconnection and romance. He twice got redressed during the night to go see her, but the spirit gently said, "Have patience. Everything will work out as it is supposed to." And apparently the spirit does not speak into contractions. They finally stopped texting around 4 a.m., and when he closed his eyes to sleep, he was taken again to their previous life together. Not a fantasy dream at all, nope. The intense passion of their lovemaking was a sight to behold. Not a sight anyone wants to see. He knew it would be difficult, but he could be patient if it meant he could experience that type of love just once in his life. But hadn't he already experienced it in previous lives? Dude, make up your mind. As he lay in the hotel bed, it was as if her spirit had joined him. They wrapped around each other and kissed gently, then intensely, and the emotions they shared were not of this world. This is so nauseating. James woke up in the hotel room feeling happier than he had in his entire life. It felt like he and Elena had fit together perfectly in every way. He rolled over to kiss her, but then reality struck. She was actually more than 20 miles away in Tokerville with her Arizona friends. He texted her, and she quickly responded. He deeply regretted not going to be with her the night before. It was as if he already knew the taste of her lips, and his hands knew every curve of her body. He knows his dreams were somehow real, and now he's changing tense. Everything was past tense, and now it's present tense. He knows his dreams were somehow real and that they were actually traveling to each other in a higher dimension. He hungered for her in ways he didn't think were possible. The voice was right. Elena was going to change his life forever. It doesn't even cross his mind that he's got a wife he committed to. He packed his suitcase and began driving north on the freeway. As each mile passed, James could feel Elena's spirit beckoning him to join her. As he approached the Tokerville exit, it took every ounce of willpower to keep driving on the freeway. Okay, we know you're on the freeway. You don't have to keep saying so. Just a thought. His attraction to her was beyond magnetic. Cliché. He felt their souls were two halves of an eternal union. Cliché. Tears filled his eyes. Cliché. Oh my gosh, dude. As he passed the freeway exit. Freeway. It's not just the exit, it's the freeway exit. In case we missed it. We needed to hear 3 times so far in this paragraph that it's the freeway. Did you catch it? Freeway. He desperately yearned to embrace her and tell her he deeply loved her, as crazy as that sounded. But he knew he would be seeing her 3 weeks later at a conference in Arizona. It seemed like an eternity away, but he sensed it would be a very significant weekend for them. He was already crazy about her. His feelings of admiration and affection for her would only grow more intense and wonderful. Nauseating. During his long drive home, James was able to text back and forth with Elena. Okay, so he does text and drive. Dude, as if everything else weren't enough, you also text while you drive? That's like a little cherry on top of your heinousness. And it was clear that they were extremely compatible and shared the same interests. It felt like talking to a long-distance best friend. When he arrived home, he searched the internet for anything about her, but there was nothing. She was a fascinating mystery that he wanted to spend the rest of eternity with. At the end of his drive, she suggested that they talk on the phone the next day. He was thrilled at the thought of hearing her voice again. He was falling more madly in love by the minute. Can you please just, not say that a gazillion times? We get it. And also the idea of, trying to get to know someone forever. There's a really awesome line in The Scarlet Pimpernel, the movie, but spoken by Anthony Andrews, the Scarlet Pimpernel, when he talks to Jane Seymour about wanting to get to know her across a very long time. That is a romantic line. Watch that. But Chad, no. You're a slug, as the jail guards called you. When James heard her voice that Monday morning, the euphoria he had felt Saturday came rushing back strongly. They talked for 2 hours, but it seemed to be only minutes. He was obsessed with her and couldn't get enough. That he couldn't stop looking at her, and now he says he's obsessed with her. I'd be like, run! During that first phone conversation with Elena, James realized she already had a strong understanding of many of the truths he had been taught regarding how the universe really worked. The typo, but he meant the loin fire. The loin fire and obsession with each other had no real explanation unless they truly had a spiritual connection before this life. Or maybe it's the scientific phenomenon of loin fire that's just your hormones and not the past life. But, I'm not a goddess, so what do I know? Gosh. He was able to help clarify many of the promptings and impressions she had felt in recent years. She knew she had lived on Earth before, and James was able to clarify when. They had been married before on this Earth, and other times on a previous Earth. Their love truly spanned the universe and eons of time. They knew the Lord had brought them together again for a crucial mission that only they could accomplish as a united couple. And I'm correcting his typos, of which there are many. Just FYI. During the next week, they spoke every day for at least an hour, but often longer. That's redundant. Like, at least an hour, often longer. I think that's implied, but whatever. They hungered to know everything about each other. Okay, and then point of view. From a basic editorial fiction writing standpoint, you need to be in one person's head. You aren't just bouncing back and forth. You don't talk about two people's points of view at the same time. They hungered to know everything about each other. No. This was a new experience for James to open up and share the true feelings of his heart. But he knew he could trust her completely. The bond between them was intense. Was. And only the vast distance between them kept their passion for each other from roaring into a blazing inferno. She quickly became his best friend. Already said that. Or better said, two best friends had reunited, and their prior love was now ignited again in a wonderful heavenly way. As November began, James and Elena had talked on the phone every day since last seeing each other. Yeah, we already know that. He was extremely impressed with her intelligence, personality, and subtle humor that made him laugh more than he had in his lifetime. She was a complete delight to talk to and the highlight of his day when he could hear her magical voice. It was so familiar to him, and it actually healed and soothed his heart and soul. They would both attend the same event in mid-November, and it seemed like that day would never arrive. Each day they opened their hearts to each other a little more. Okay, like they basically opened each other's own hearts and smushed them together. How do you open it more than that? But okay. James knew he could trust her with the mysteries of the universe that had been revealed to him. He knew they had been married before. We know. And they had been close friends with the Savior when he lived in Jerusalem. He already said that. James had served in an important position in the Lord's church, and Elena had been his beloved spouse and best friend. That relationship was now meant to continue in this lifetime. In Jerusalem. Okay, I think this was mentioned in the trial. James and Elena had enjoyed tremendous intimacy. Their physical desire for each other was unmatched, and they were fortunate that they could be alone morning, noon, and night. And they seized every chance to passionately express their love to each other. Okay, what question? Wasn't James Jesus' right-hand man, supposedly? In which case, wasn't he busy doing preaching and church work stuff? Wouldn't Elena just be constantly pregnant at this rate? You see, logic doesn't make sense in the Chad world. Oof. They simply could never get enough, even after many years of marriage. Everyone knew they were crazy about each other, That's the biblical term for it, crazy about each other. I'm sure that's how James and Elena back in, Christ's day referred to it, crazy about each other. That sounds historical. And they were a wonderful example of how spouses should cleave together in love and unity. This is an example of horny teenagers, not an example of a husband and a wife cleaving together through thick and thin and getting through challenges together. That's not what this is. And loyalty and fidelity and all that stuff, because they're actively betraying their spouses. Okay. James had visions of how they could happily and joyfully pleasure each other in his office. Also, we're back to modern day. They had two favorite positions that particularly bonded them together. I'm about to throw up in my mouth a little. Nothing meant more to James than holding Elena in his arms and unifying their bodies in perfect synchronization. As James and Elena talked on the phone, he tried to delicately describe their connection to each other, and he was delighted that she believed him. He also shared that they had been married other times on a previous world, and she accepted that information as well. So this is where we get the fact that Lori and Chad individually were toxic, but together they were a bomb that just exploded. That she just ate up his crap, and she was enamored with his prophet persona. James was overjoyed to have these memories restored to him because he truly loved her with all of his heart. I just keep thinking of Tammy and those kids. Oh gosh, dude, you suck. He knew they were meant to be married again and complete important missions together before the second coming. He was ecstatic that she was receiving confirmation of these things as well. As they talked on the phone, the spiritual connection was so intense that it also produced physical desires. I mean, like the scientific phenomenon of loin fire. And it was as if their spirits were making love, despite the great distance between them. Spirits making love? Okay, Chad. James knew his spirit was visiting her during those conversations. He also became aware that his spirit would visit her at night, and they would wrap around each other in a sensual embrace. Okay, he described that almost verbatim that first night in the hotel room. Kissing her was so wonderful and real, and he knew that the next time they saw each other, he needed to kiss her. He wouldn't be able to resist holding her. He was absolutely in love with her in every way. By the time the conference arrived, so this is mid-November, James and Elena had become very close through their phone connections. We know. But he desperately needed to see her again. She agreed to pick him up at the airport and take him to his hotel. He was extremely nervous, worried that the spark they had felt earlier might not be there. Again, if you supposedly know all this stuff about your past and future, why are you nervous? Dude, make up your mind. But as she arrived at the airport and he opened the car door, his heart nearly burst at the sight of her smile. She was stunningly gorgeous, and as they gripped each other's hands, the electricity was tangible. The love between them was powerful and real. The hotel was only a short distance away, and he invited her into the room. They were standing alone in the room. The room. Gosh, dude, repetition. And he put his arm around her and looked into her gorgeous blue eyes. They hungered for each other. Okay, and the way that's phrased, it sounds like the eyes are hungering for each other. That would be a misplaced modifier. That's kind of a funny image. And he leaned forward and fulfilled a promise he had made to her a few days earlier. He gently kissed her tender lips, and the same heavenly electricity filled his entire body. Okay, we have electricity twice in 2 paragraphs, so try something new. We also had a shock go through on the first page, I think. So let's try some different imagery. The passionate magic they had felt many centuries earlier came surging back powerfully. So surge is another electrical term. Try another one. James moved to the couch and Elena straddled him effortlessly, as if they had done this thousands of times before. She fit perfectly on him, and they pressed their lips tightly against each other. The feeling was exquisite, and they both smiled and moaned at the sensations passing between them. They were still fully clothed, so that makes it okay. But the intensity of the intimacy was undeniable. Oh, dude. He likes the letter of the law, doesn't he? So, I didn't technically do this thing. Yeah, in spirit you did, though. James felt the powerful desire to bless Elena at that time. As they stayed in that favorite position, he moved his hands to her head. Okay, this is absolutely blasphemous. Priesthood blessing in the middle of something that's full-on infidelity. This is offensive. He began to cleanse and purify each part of her body. He could feel the pains and troubles she had endured throughout her life being removed from her soul and being taken outside and destroyed. That's not a normal priesthood blessing either. James's hands worked their way down her body and lingered briefly on her beautiful breasts. He truly had the body of a goddess. He was experiencing an indescribable mix of physical and spiritual ecstasy. I think it's all physical, dude, and you were mixing up the two. He soon concluded the cleansing of her body from head to toe, then filled her body with a balm of light and love. James could see the happiness in her eyes, and instinctively their mouths came together again. The fire was burning strongly within them both, and as their kissing grew more intense, he gently said, "I love you, Elena." This is just making me more and more mad. It's not even funny at this point. It's just pissing me off. Those words sparked a frenzy within them. Saying I love you, suddenly they're frenzied. That's called lust, not love. Their tongues effortlessly entwined and their hips jived in a smooth, erotic rhythm. I know, here we've got missing punctuation. Two lovers, long separated, were finally united in heavenly bliss. After a few moments of excitement, pleasure, and fun on the couch, James and Elena both felt compelled to change into more comfortable clothing. James put on some athletic shorts and a blue shirt, and Elena put on a stunning black top and tight leggings. The top revealed just enough, but not too much, and James was overjoyed at the sight. That's the most descriptive he's gotten. James took her in his arms, and we're well over halfway now, just so you're aware. And they smiled at each other. The vibration in the room was intense, and their hearts reached out to each other in glorious reunion. James gently touched the sides of Elena's breasts, and he was in ecstasy. She stood on her tiptoes and gave him a sensual kiss that sent electricity throughout his body. They moved toward the bed and were quickly entwined around each other. She was so beautiful, loving, and enchanting that James could hardly breathe. They were both aroused, but he knew there were limitations on what could occur that night. Okay, why? You've already broken all of your covenants, so what does it matter whether you cross that last line? Later on this month is when they go to the temple together, which they should not have been allowed to do at this point, and then pretend to get spiritually married. So I think after that is when they start to actually fulfill the deed, because I guess in their head there's some sort of... that makes it okay. But they kissed for nearly an hour and pressed against each other tightly. Toward the end of the evening, Elena laid on her stomach, and the editor in me wants to land him on that one. It's not laid. Dude, you suck. And he actually spelled it as laud, but also laid is incorrect there. at the end of the bed, and James caressed her fabulous body. He grasped her perfect bottom with both hands, and she expressed how much she loved that. She soon sat up and straddled him again as they passionately kissed farewell. They knew they would see each other again in the morning, but the separation seemed too long. But they knew that the long wait to find their eternal match had come to an end, and James was overjoyed beyond description. His LDS readership would reject this completely. And this is coming from someone who's written a lot of clean LDS fiction, and just clean fiction in general, quote-unquote clean. Bad term, I know, but not non-spicy. James and Elena had agreed to visit the temple the following morning. Everything they did the day before, and then even those phone calls in the weeks before, automatically made them ineligible to attend. And they both knew that. You talk to your leaders every 2 years to get your temple recommended, and unless they're notified that you've done something, they're not going to yank it. It should have been yanked. If their leaders had known, it would have been yanked. She returned to the hotel room, and after additional romance on the couch, they calmed their nerves enough to give each other a blessing. Okay, and I've said before, like, stewardship is a big deal in the church. You give blessings to someone that you have stewardship over. He had no stewardship over her. He had no right or ability to receive revelation on her behalf. As James placed his hands on her head, he connected with Elena's true eternal self. He knew he was in the presence of an exalted goddess. You already said that. Who had returned to Earth to perform a special mission. This mission included being with him, because he's so special, and they would progress together as translated beings. No, you won't. The full plan wasn't yet completely clear to him, but the immense power radiating from her confirmed his belief that she was among the greatest women in the universe. Because she sees him as wonderful, therefore she's great. Gosh, gag. Ugh. She then gave him a tremendous blessing that helped him realize how much she truly loved him and wanted to be with him forever. And that's a load of crap. He was deeply humbled that such an incredible woman regarded him so highly. Again, it's about him and how a woman views him, not about his own commitments or anything else. His heart burned as she blessed him, and he had glimpses come to his mind of not only their life in Jerusalem, but even as a couple on a previous earth. He knew they had been in eternal companions for eons, and that their love was beyond celestial. Okay, and you've said that several times, dude, stop. They embraced following the blessings, and the emotions they felt were a mixture of eternal bliss and telestial desire. Okay, well, at least you're mentioning telestial desire and admitting that it's hormonal and you're just a horny dude. The chemistry was undeniable, but the spiritual unity was a glorious bonus for them both. They had only known each other for 3 weeks, but two lonely, misunderstood souls that have finally found their best friend that they could trust and confide in. Okay, you already said that. Gag. We're almost done. I can get through this. They arrived at the temple, and they both felt they should do sealings together. Did ya? Did you feel that way? They were soon sealed in a sealing room facing each other. So they're probably doing proxy sealings. So if they felt they should do sealings, that's proxy work. So not being sealed to each other. So they're in a sealing room, and they're pretending that the work they're doing for the dead is actually real for themselves. So no. Elena looked so stunning as she smiled at him. She seemed calm, while he felt quite nervous. I wonder if he had a prick of conscience there and thought, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. I doubt it, since I don't think he has a conscience. Their opportunity soon came to kneel across the altar from each other, and as the sealer pronounced those sacred words, James and Elena knew that they were now sealed as husband and wife for eternity. No, you were not. That is absolutely disgusting. As the earthly sealing was taking place, a similar scene involving their spirits was happening on a higher plane, where they kissed and unified their souls. They knew they had just begun a new journey together that was eternal and never ending. This is vile, guys. This is just vile. After the sealing, they went to lunch together, and they felt so comfortable together. That's a really boring line right there after blah, 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 all the intensifiers. Together, comfortable lunch. Okay. Everything felt so right. James could look into her eyes forever unless he was gently kissing her and telling her how much he loved her. Even when they held hands, there was a powerful vibration that exceeded the telestial world. And again, for those who don't know, the telestial world is supposed to be the one we're in now. They attended the conference, but their thoughts were completely focused on each other. James gave a talk that was well received and sparked a great interest in his books. Elena joined him at the selling table, and they sold more than 359 books within a couple of hours. More than 359? That's a very specific number. So did you sell 360? It's a very odd way to phrase it. But all they really wanted was to slip away and express their love to each other. And all I can think of is you're not making much money as a writer, even selling 359 books or more than that. Figure out your travel costs and all that. Tammy was the one making the bread for the family. Tammy worked her butt off while he went did this. They went to dinner with some friends, but afterward they were able to find some time alone. They drove to a secluded area and slipped into the back seat. Elena was wearing a pair of incredibly sexy jeans, and as she straddled James in the back seat, he once again grasped her fantastic bottom. So, guys, back seat of a car? Oh my goodness. She pushed him back into a reclining position, and their fit perfectly together. Okay, but we've heard that already. They kissed passionately and rhythmically against each other. It was intense and undeniably real, getting repetitive and just gross. James was now madly, crazily in love with her. Just now. And it was so wonderful to know that she felt the same way about him. One powerful moment happened earlier that day. So now we're doing a flashback to the same day, because that's good writing. When Elena was listening to another speaker while James stayed at the table, but he thought he heard Elena say, "Come stand behind me." He went into the room and saw her standing against a wall. He moved behind her. She's standing against a wall. How does he move behind her? Like, seriously, I can't see that. Blocking is an important thing in writing. He moved behind her and they discreetly touched. After a few minutes, he checked his phone and saw she had texted him that very sentence at the store. At the Stone? Typo, I'm sure. He heard her at the same time, probably. He heard her voice. It was a wonderful testament that they were already communicating with each other on a higher level. It took a while for everyone to settle into their beds, but once the house quieted down, James opened his door slightly and saw the wondrous sight of Elena approaching him. They locked the door behind her and quickly got under the covers. He was wearing his athletic shorts. Of course he was. And she was wearing tight, thin leggings. Of course she was. And a loose top. They clung to each other and kissed desperately, hungrily. James placed his hand under her top and caressed her splendid breasts. She moaned happily and wrapped her legs around his waist. Only two things, layers of material, separated, and they could feel each other's most intimate body parts in detail. And yeah, we're righteous. The intensity and spiritual vibration exceeded anything either one of them had ever felt before. So he's using vibration a couple times now, which is odd. And I think this is maybe one place where John Pryor got that term. He kept bringing it up and nobody knew what he was talking about. They knew their spirits were actually intimately joined together, and it felt like they had left the celestial world. Elena soon got on top of James again, and the rhythm again, like, he cannot be original, can he? Continued for several more minutes. Toward the end, they both removed their tops, and they pressed their bodies together skin on skin. They fit together perfectly, and their kisses were deep and frenzied. Their desire for each other was beyond compare. As the reunion in the spare room came to a conclusion, "Gee, Chad, why didn't you give us more?" I'm glad he didn't. I'm so kind of surprised he didn't, honest. Raphael, which again is another name for James, knew Elena was his perfect match. They longed to stay entwined together, but it would be best to separate and get some rest. Well, I'm glad you thought of something that was smart at some point. We need to get some rest. Forget our families and spouses and children, but you know. But by 6 a.m., James couldn't stand to be away from her any longer. He slipped into her bedroom and stood at her bedside. And that feels creepy. She was unbelievably gorgeous, and he greatly desired to join her in the bed and continue the previous night's activities. How many hours have passed? But there were other guests in the house who weren't yet aware of their sizzling love for each other. Sizzling love? Lust. Let's clarify. Lust. So he gently touched her shoulder to awaken her. Her eyes opened, and then she reached up and grabbed his arms to pull him into the bed. He smiled, realizing she wasn't fully awake and had likely been dreaming of him. "Oh, sure." Egocentric, narcissistic Chad. He whispered that he loved her and hoped she would go walking with him through the neighborhood. And now I'm thinking they both probably have morning breath. James and Elena had enjoyed a walk together the previous morning along the quiet streets of her gated community. And why didn't he bring that up earlier in the story? The sensual attraction between them had been intense, and they touched shoulders and held hands as they walked. This sounds like they're 12 now. They were like magnets that couldn't be separated. Oh, there's an original image. She had worn exercise leggings that drove him crazy with desire. Lori in her leggings. He likes it. Gosh, dude, do you have to keep repeating that word? He has no originality. The leggings emphasized her perfectly sculpted bottom. Okay, and the fact that he can't even say butt or behind or anything just feels so ridiculous. And grasped that bottom firmly and powerfully with both hands. Powerfully. Okay, that would hurt. Kissing her passionately. Lots of adverbs, not good writing. Powerfully and passionately in the same... Oh, and firmly. Perfect. Okay, let's see. How many in this one sentence we've got? Perfectly, firmly, powerfully, and passionately. 4 adverbs in one sentence. That's kind of crappy. They went walking again that next morning. Unfortunately, a friend invited herself along, but James and Elena were still completely engrossed in each other. That poor friend who was an absolute third wheel. Try to be, like, I don't know, social and be nice to someone else, but you're incapable of that, Chad and Lori. So yeah, he had to catch a flight home later that morning, but he was able to give Elena a special blessing before departing. The spiritual manipulation and like just disrespect making me so mad. As he placed his hands on her head, he felt their spirits connect with a surge of power. Spirits connecting, electricity imagery. At that moment, his only desire in life was to be with her as always, throughout eternity, and that desire has continued to intensify. During the blessing, he was shown the great missions they would perform together. He knew this was an eternal union that would forever change the world. Not the world, but the lives of lots of people. Tears filled his eyes to be in the presence of this holy goddess again. He was nearly overcome by the spirit as he sensed her true place in the universe as a majestic archangel. End of story. And then apparently in a follow-up message, she said that she loved the story. That's disgusting. And it's also really bad writing. I thought I would get more laughs out of it, but honestly, it just makes me so mad and so sad for Tammy and their kids, especially now that the kids are still siding with Chad as far as we know. That justice was served. And let's hope that Charles and Brandon get justice as well. Date with Lori. Justin Lum, investigative reporter from Fox 10 Phoenix. He was the one who fought to get cameras into the courtroom for Lori's Arizona trial, and he won. So yay on that. Good job, Justin Lum. As of July 2024, Lori's trial, originally it was supposed to begin in August. It has been pushed now to end of February 2025. The current date is February 24th. Who knows if that will happen? And of course, this is the trial in Arizona for the murder of Charles and the attempted murder of Brandon Boudreaux, her then niece's husband at the time. So she's already been found guilty of murder and conspiracy to commit murder of Tylee and JJ and Tammy Daybell. So these are the next charges that she is awaiting trial on. If you're still here, appreciate it. Give the video a like, subscribe if you're new, hit that notification bell, and I need to shake all this off with a little bit of chocolate. Maybe some hot cocoa this time. Leave some chocolate emojis in the comments and let me know what you think of Chad's pathetic attempt at a romance novel.